He dragged her from the ruins, thinking she was nobility. Then she said, "I was bait." The heat pressed in like a living beast, gnawing at the seals of Lieutenant Mason's exosuit and searing the bare skin at his jawline. The Valyrian consulate on Orpheus 9, once a beacon of galactic unity, had become a war zone, blazing plasma, detonations, and the echo of panicked cries. Mason's visor flickered with tactical data, enemy positions, structural collapse warnings, and the urgent pulse of his objective, Lady Cyrene. He sprinted down the marbled corridor, heart pounding, bootsteps lost beneath the rolling thunder of bombardment. Blue fire painted the ceiling with frantic shadows. His comm crackled. "Extraction window closing, Mason! 5 minutes!" But he shut it off. He was alone now, save for the mission that guided every instinct. A barricade of fallen statuary blocked the grand archway to the audience chamber. Mason didn't hesitate. He slapped a breaching charge onto the twisted bronze. 3 seconds, 2, 1. Then the world punched inward with concussive force, spraying crystal shards and smoking dust into the air. The chaos outside fell away in the sudden vacuum of noise. Inside, the chamber had become a mausoleum of shattered grandeur. Priceless mosaics smoldered where plasma had struck, and a rain of fractured glass fell from the star spire's lofty window, its golden beams bent and broken. The air shimmered with heat and ozone. At the far end, beneath a collapsed support of gold-inlaid stone, a figure lay half-buried. He moved, heedless of the heat radiating through his suit. As he drew near, he saw her. Lady Cyrene. Even streaked with ash and blood, she radiated authority, her posture unyielding, her obsidian and gold robes torn but regal, her slender build framed by the debris. Long, graceful fingers, nails lacquered a deep jade, clutched a fractured comm crystal. Her life monitor pulsed on her wrist, each beat weaker than the last. Mason's throat tightened. For a moment, the war fell away. He forced it back. She was his assignment. No more, no less. He slung his carbine and dropped to one knee, fingers probing the edge of the fallen beam. The marble beneath him was slick, melted in places by the relentless fire. Suit servos whined in protest as he braced himself. "Hold still, my lady," he grunted. She watched him, emerald eyes steady, betraying neither fear nor pain. With a final lung-tearing heave, the beam shifted. Mason's arms trembled with the effort, sweat burning his eyes. The stone groaned, then rolled free. He slipped his arms beneath her, easing her from the tangled folds of her robe. He was startled by how light she felt, how delicate. Yet her heart fluttered against his chest plate with defiant strength. He shielded her head with his hand and turned, ducking as the far wall began to buckle. The ceiling moaned, raining gold and ash. "We have to move," he said, his voice raw. She nodded once, regal even in ruin. The escape became a fever dream of violence and desperation. The consulate's corridors were choked with flame and smoke. Insurgents, faces masked, weapons raised, poured from side passages, shouting in a dozen tongues. Mason melted into the shadows, firing bursts with one hand, cradling Cyrene with the other. Each shot was calculated, each step a risk. They passed through the Hall of Aegis where ancient armor stood burning in silent witness. Mason triggered a suppressant foam canister. Frosty vapor billowed, smothering the flames, buying precious seconds. An insurgent rounded the corner. Mason dropped him with a single shot, then toppled a burning sculpture to block pursuit. Debris crashed behind them, the roar nearly drowning out Cyrene's quiet gasp. A plasma bolt struck his shoulder, spinning him sideways. Pain lanced through him, but he kept moving, adrenaline drowning everything but the mission. Behind a crumbling pillar he crouched, shielding Cyrene as rubble and firestorm closed in. For a heartbeat, all was still. She stirred in his arms, her eyes fluttering open. Deep emerald, flecked with gold, they regarded him with composed curiosity. Her accent was precise, each word a note in a forgotten song. The harmonic core, was it secured? He glanced at his HUD, heart sinking at the blinking red. Negative, my lady. System failure is imminent. Cyrene's gaze locked with his, and for a moment the chaos faded. In that glance, respect passed between them, silent, profound. They were no longer noble and soldier, but survivors in a storm. The pillar exploded without warning, shattering the spell. Mason wrapped himself around Cyrene and ran, every muscle screaming. He dodged falling beams, ducked a burst of enemy fire, and burst through the shattered portico into the open. Acid rain hissed against his armor as he stumbled into Orpheus IX's night. Lightning traced the clouds with sickly green. The evac shuttle hovered ahead, ramp yawning open, engines howling. Mason ran, lungs burning, the world collapsing into the pounding of his boots and the frantic beat of Cyrene's heart. He sprinted up the ramp, shouting, "Go! Go! Go!" The doors slammed shut behind them, sealing away the chaos. The shuttle lifted off, and for the first time in what felt like hours, Mason let himself breathe. He set Cyrene gently onto a bench, his hands trembling with spent adrenaline. She sagged, regal composure bending but not breaking. He pulled off his helmet and for the first time saw her clearly. Luminous skin, elongated ears, a thin cut tracing her brow like a comet's tail. Cyrene watched him with that same serene intensity. "You are wounded," he said, voice softer than he meant. He reached for the medkit, but she recoiled, the smallest flinch. He paused, hands hovering between them. "I need to clean the wound," he murmured, his tone a fragile bridge. Her emerald eyes searched his, weighing trust against necessity. After a long, silent moment, she nodded. Mason's hands were gentle as he dabbed the cut, careful not to press too hard, steadying her with a thumb at her cheek. The touch, brief but intimate, startled them both. A soldier's hands on a noblewoman's skin, the boundary between rescuer and rescued flickering in the electric hush. He finished quickly, offering her a flask of water. Their fingers brushed as she took it, and something passed between them, unspoken, undeniable. In the silence, as the shuttle soared away from burning Orpheus IX, the lines of duty and destiny began, imperceptibly, to blur. The safe house was a sterile bunker deep beneath the city. Protocol: 72 hours, no contact. The air was filtered, stale and chill. The walls, bone white, hummed with hidden machinery. The only sounds were the low whir of the automed unit and the soft, uncertain rhythm of two strangers forced together by fate. Mason sat on the edge of a metal cot, the plates of his exosuit scattered in a corner, sweat-damp undershirt clinging to his back. He flexed his shoulder, the wound already healing thanks to the nanite spray. Across the room, Cyrene perched on her own bunk, posture impossibly straight despite the exhaustion etched beneath her eyes. Her robe, cleaned and mended by the safe house's auto-fabricator, draped her frame in obsidian silk, shot through with the faintest threads of gold. Even here, in these bleak quarters, she was regal, untouchable. The silence stretched, broken only by Mason's breathing as he stretched out sore limbs. He caught Cyrene watching him, her gaze intent, unguarded for the first time since their flight. He straightened, self-conscious. "You should rest," Mason said, voice gentler now, stripped of the clipped edge he wore in the field. Cyrene's lips curved into a faint, wry smile. "Rest is a privilege rarely granted to me," she replied, her words still formal but softened by fatigue. She stood, her movements measured, and crossed to the ration dispenser inset in the wall. The machine whirred, producing 2 steaming cups, clear broth for her, dark synth coffee for him. She handed him the cup with a steady hand. He accepted it with a nod. "Thank you, my lady." She lingered by the dispenser, eyes tracing the sterile lines of the room. "Tell me of your world, Lieutenant Mason." He hesitated, caught off guard by the request. He stared into the swirling darkness of his drink, searching for words. "Tara?" he said finally, voice quieter. "It's chaotic. Beautiful. Mountain lakes with water so clear you can see every stone beneath, even in winter. Cities that never sleep. Noise. People everywhere. My family. Sunday dinners. Everyone packed around a too small table, arguing about nothing." His eyes softened. "There's warmth there, even when things are hard." Cyrene listened, absorbing every word as if she were storing them for some future when she might need to remember what belonging felt like. "It sounds alive," she murmured, her voice tinged with longing. He glanced at her, seeing her not as a mission or a political pawn, but as a woman displaced, adrift. "What about your court?" he asked quietly. Her jaw tightened, shoulders drawing back in a reflexive display of dignity. "The Valyrian court is structured. Everything has its place. Ritual governs all, how we walk, how we speak, even how we breathe. Every gesture has meaning, every look, every silence. It is a beautiful prison, Lieutenant." The vulnerability in her voice surprised him. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Doesn't anyone break the rules?" Her laugh was soft, brittle. "Only the foolish, or the desperate." She turned away, gazing at the blank wall. "And they do not last long." He studied her profile, the elegant line of her jaw, the strength in her posture even now. He felt a pull, a need to bridge the gulf between them. "Why did you join the diplomatic corps?" he asked. Cyrene's fingers tightened around her cup. "Choice is an illusion at court. I was selected. Groomed for it since childhood. I became what was required." She shrugged, the movement delicate and controlled. "But I have always wanted to see the real stars, not just their images in archives." He smiled, the sadness in her words striking a familiar chord. "I used to climb onto my roof as a kid, stare up for hours. My mother would yell at me to come down before I froze, but I never listened." She tilted her head, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "Were you always so disobedient, Lieutenant?" He grinned. "Depends who you ask." Their laughter broke the tension, just for a moment. The hours slipped by in a slow cascade. The automed finished its work, leaving silvery marks on skin that had known too much violence. Rations tasted like nothing, but sharing them made the silence less oppressive. As the evening wore on, the bunker's lights dimmed in imitation of night. The only illumination came from the viewport, a simulated window displaying a panorama of stars. Cyrene stood before it, arms folded, face bathed in cold starlight. Mason lingered at the table, his gaze drawn again and again to her silhouette. He rose, padding silently across the room until he stood just behind her, close enough to sense the warmth of her body, to smell the faint scent of smoke and something floral. He hesitated, torn between caution and the force that had drawn him to her from the moment they'd met in fire and blood. Cyrene's voice was barely a whisper, fragile and reverent. "I have only seen the stars in archives. They are more unpredictable than I imagined." He looked at the simulated sky, pinpricks of white shifting and flaring as if alive. "They're never the same twice, no matter how many times you look." His hand hovered at her shoulder, then settled lightly. She turned, the motion graceful, uncertain. Her eyes searched his, luminous and searching. In that moment, the walls of protocol and duty fell away. He reached out, fingers brushing her cheek, and then he kissed her. soft at first, then with a hunger neither could deny. The gulf between human and Valyrian, between soldier and noble, vanished in that spark. Cyrene melted into him, her hands rising to rest at his shoulders. The kiss deepened, carrying with it all the longing and fear and hope they'd held back. For a few heartbeats, nothing else existed but the warmth of skin and the shuddering relief of contact. A shrill chime sliced through the silence, wrenching them apart. Mason, breathless, pressed his forehead to hers for an instant before striding to the console. He keyed in his code, the screen flickering with encrypted glyphs. Cyrene wrapped her arms around herself, watching him with wide, uncertain eyes. Mason's face shifted as he read the message. First relief, then a cold, dawning shock. He turned, voice hollow. Primary target secure at secondary site. Lady Cyrene is not the principal. The words hung between them like a blade. Cyrene's mask shattered, anguish raw in her voice. The Alliance was never at risk, Lieutenant. Only I was. Her shoulders shook, composure gone. I was meant to be lost here. I was bait. The truth crashed down, brutal, undeniable. Mason stepped back, his features hardening, the professionalism he'd shed returning in a rush. The brief intimacy they'd found was gone, replaced by a cold void neither knew how to fill. He looked away, jaw clenched, the echo of her touch burning on his skin. In the sterile bunker, surrounded by silence and secrets, the hope that had kindled between them was smothered, left as little more than ashes. An hour later, the AI's monotone sliced through the silence, cold and without emotion. Directive incoming. Priority, highest encryption. The room's hollow panel flickered to life, casting jagged blue light across Mason's face as he approached. He entered his authorization, heart thrumming with unease. Text scrolled, each word a blow. Assets roll complete. Principal safe. Alliance intact. Asset survival now a liability. Potential symbol for insurgents. Eliminate. Stage as casualty during safehouse breach. Confirm. The words hung in the sterile air, poison disguised as protocol. Terminate. He'd executed such orders before, ghosted threats and closed files on people who never saw the end coming. But this time, the target was not a stranger. This time, it was the woman who, hours before, had trusted him with her life and her fears. The woman whose lips had trembled against his, whose soul he'd glimpsed in the hush between violence and silence. He stared at the command, dread curdling in his chest. Cyrene stood at the viewport, silhouetted by the fake stars, regal spine straight yet tense. He saw the new lines of fear at the corners of her mouth, the way her hands twisted in the folds of her robe. She felt it, the shift in the air, the tide turning against her. What had begun as a mission had become a betrayal, and she was the offering. He watched her, guilt and duty a storm within him. He recalled her laughter over rationed broth, the tentative hope in her eyes as she looked at simulated constellations. He remembered the warmth of her hand, the fire that had flared between them, and the quiet trust she'd offered him. So rare, so fragile. He had a choice, but it was not the kind the protocols accounted for. With quiet resolve, Mason crossed the bunker and entered the armory. The racks hummed, recognizing his biometrics. He scanned the selection, bypassing the silent, lethal syringes and silenced sidearms. His hand settled on a compact carbine, sleek, lethal, but not for the purpose intended by his orders. He slotted in a power cell, checked the charge. Every movement was deliberate, final. He returned to the main chamber, weapon held not as a threat, but as a lifeline. Cyrene turned, eyes wide, uncertain. She read the decision in his face before he spoke. He kept his voice low, urgent. The north wall is weakest. I'll breach it. Set a charge. You'll have 3 minutes to reach the service ducts. There's a grav bike in the sublevel. Access code 749 read. Take it and go. For a long moment, she said nothing. Her throat worked as she struggled to process the meaning behind his words. She stared at the weapon he offered, realization dawning slowly, painfully. "You're not following your orders," she whispered. He shook his head. "No, not this time." A single shuddering breath escaped her. "They'll hunt you." He gave a grim, lopsided smile. "I know." Cyrene's regal composure faltered, replaced by a flicker of hope and something deeper. Gratitude, fierce and unspoken. She accepted the carbine, her slender fingers closing around it with surprising steadiness. Their gazes locked, an unspoken vow in the hush before chaos. Mason crossed to the wall, hands moving fast and sure as he fixed the breaching charge. The seconds stretched, filled with the whine of servos and the staccato beat of his heart. He glanced over his shoulder. "On my mark, move fast, don't look back." She nodded, jaw set. The fear was still there, but so was something else. Trust, tempered by fire. He armed the detonator and fired a warning shot into the wall. The impact was thunderous, deafening in the tight space. Sirens wailed, red lights flared to life, and the AI's voice crackled. "Security breach detected. Alert. All personnel, respond." Fugitive protocol engaged. "Go!" Mason shouted. He slammed his palm to the detonator. The wall erupted in a spray of ferrocrete and flame, smoke billowing into the room. The air filled with the acrid tang of burnt circuitry. Mason grabbed Cyrene's hand, pulling her through the jagged opening before the ceiling alarms could recalibrate. Their feet pounded across the fractured threshold into the hidden maintenance shaft beyond. The AI's voice pursued them, mechanical and relentless. "Unauthorized movement, lethal force authorized, asset and agent considered hostile." Mason led, Cyrene close behind, her robe trailing like a banner of defiance. The tunnel was a maze of pipes and humming conduits, darkness broken only by the blinking hazard lights. Mason's mind ran hot with tactical calculations, routes, timing, countermeasures. He heard pursuit in the walls, the hiss of booted feet, the whir of security drones. Cyrene kept pace, breath tight but determined. "Left," she called, voice steady despite the danger. Mason darted down the indicated passage, trusting her instincts without hesitation. They moved as one, no longer soldier and asset, but allies. The moment of decision had welded their fates together. A drone dropped from the ceiling ahead, its auto turret spinning to life. Mason fired, a burst of plasma searing its sensor array. The drone shrieked and crashed in a rain of sparks. "Keep moving!" he barked, adrenaline burning away doubt. Cyrene paused only to snatch a maintenance badge from the wreckage, pressing it to a security panel at the next hatch. The lock disengaged with a hiss. "This way," she said, and Mason realized she'd been studying the safe house's schematics all along, preparing for this moment, even as hope had seemed lost. They descended a spiral stairwell lit only by emergency strobes. Below, the sublevel stretched out in inky shadow. Far off, the faint blue glow of a grav bike pulsed beside a charging station. Mason keyed in the code, the vehicle powering up with a low, eager hum. He turned to Cyrene, urgency in his gaze. "Take it. Get clear of the city. There's a black site on the western ridge. Signal me when you're safe." She hesitated, eyes searching his face. "What about you?" He offered a ghost of a smile. "I'll buy you time. They'll chase me before they chase you." For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Cyrene reached for his hand, fingers cool and trembling. She pressed her lips to his knuckles, a gesture both royal and achingly intimate. "Thank you, Mason," she whispered. His reply was lost as alarms blared louder, echoing through the concrete labyrinth. Cyrene swung onto the grav bike, gun cradled at her side. Mason watched her go, pride and sorrow warring in his eyes. She shot him one last glance, then accelerated into the darkness, a streak of hope in a world of betrayal. Mason turned, carbine ready as security teams closed in. He disappeared into the shadows, heart pounding not with fear, but with a reckless, liberating certainty. For the first time, he was fighting for something more than orders. Together, in that escape, they became more than what the galaxy demanded. No longer pawns in a distant game, but partners bound by a trust stronger than any protocol, moving as one through the crucible of fire and fate. They reached the grav bike, a battered, ugly machine, its armor pitted from storms and old skirmishes, the paint flaking away in dull patches of gray and orange. Mason swung one leg over, his movements economical, practiced, but the weight of what he'd chosen pressed into every breath. He extended a hand, helping Cyrene climb up behind him. She gathered the remnants of her obsidian and gold robes, the fabric torn and singed, now billowing like a banner behind her, a declaration of survival. Her grip on the carbine was sure, her chin lifted, eyes fierce. He glanced back at her, their faces inches apart in the grav bike's narrow saddle. "Hold tight," he said, his voice low and steady. The title of soldier, the label of asset, they meant nothing now, burned away by the decision that had set them running. All that remained was this: Mason and Cyrene, fugitives together on the raw skin of a moon. He throttled up, the bike's ancient engine coughing once, then catching with a low, guttural hum. They shot forward, wheels skimming the pale dust, the world around them a blur of ash and shadow. The moon's surface was a wasteland, fractured basalt, jagged ridges, the wreckage of past battles scattered beneath a sky that shimmered with cold starlight and the occasional flicker of a distant aurora. Every rise and fall in the terrain sent the machine jarring beneath them, but Cyrene held fast, arms wrapped tight around Mason's waist, her breath warm against the side of his neck. The comm channel crackled with distant orders and fruitless sweeps. Mason shut it off, silencing the world behind them. For the first time since Orpheus 9 had burned, he let himself feel the wild freedom of running not from something, but towards something unknown. They veered off the main service trail, plunging into a field of obsidian rubble. Mason's eyes scanned the horizon, seeking a place to disappear. There, a dormant caldera, its bowl sheltered from all but the sharpest scanners, the crater walls casting long, protective shadows. He guided the grav bike up a narrow incline, then coasted it down into the sheltering darkness. He killed the engine. The sudden hush was overwhelming. The wind fell away, replaced by the soft ticking of the bike's cooling systems and their own breathing. Quick, unsteady, alive. Mason dismounted first, boots crunching on the powdery dust. He turned to help Cyrene down. She accepted his hand, fingers lingering in his. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence around them was vast, unbroken, a world away from alarms and orders and the cold calculus of politics. She looked back at the route they'd come, then up at the sky, a lattice of stars, sharper and more countless than any simulation. Her shoulders eased. "How far until they realize we're gone?" she asked quietly. Mason checked the horizon, eyes narrowed. "An hour, maybe 2. I scrambled the logs and looped the feeds. With luck, they'll still be searching the city when we're halfway to the dark side." Cyrene's lips twisted in a faint, wry smile. "You're better at this than I expected, Lieutenant." He managed a laugh, the sound ragged but real. "Turns out desperation is a good teacher." She stepped closer, her face half lit by the faint glow from the grav bike's dash. "And what happens when they do find our trail?" Mason's jaw tensed, but he didn't look away. "We keep moving. There are places on this moon, old mining tunnels, forgotten relay stations, places even the best trackers won't risk." He reached up, brushing a lock of hair from her cheek, his touch gentle, lingering. We'll find our way. Her eyes glistened in the low light, something fragile flickering there. Hope, mingled with fear. Do you regret it? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. He shook his head, his hand cupping her jaw. No, not for a second. His thumb traced the line of her cheek. I'd do it again, every time. She leaned into his palm, the last of her formal reserve falling away. You saved me, she breathed. He smiled, warmth blooming in his chest. You saved yourself. I just gave you the chance. She glanced down, lashes sweeping shadows across her cheeks. I never thought I'd have a choice, she admitted. Not about my life. Not about anything. He stepped closer, their bodies nearly touching. You have one now, he murmured. Her fingers caught his wrist, holding him there. What now? She whispered, the question trembling in the air between them. He met her gaze, searching her face for fear or doubt, finding only trust. His other hand slid to the nape of her neck, thumb tracing the elegant curve of her ear. Wherever we choose, he answered, voice rough, honest. In the hush, with the world falling away, he drew her close and kissed her. Not as an ending, but as a beginning. The kiss was soft at first, then deepened, hungry and certain, a promise exchanged between two souls who had nothing left to lose and everything to discover. When they parted, the old world, soldier and bait, orders and betrayals, was gone. There was only the moon's shadow, the hush of their shared breath, and the certainty that, for the first time, they were free. 5 years later, the back bays of Driftport reeked of hot metal and ozone. Vents belched steam in rhythm with the clamor of distant shipyards, and the neon haze from 1,000 repair stalls flickered across oil-stained floors. Mason, now answering to Max, the name a half-joke with the local registry clerk, worked with sleeves rolled high, his hands deft and sure as he coaxed new life from battered grav-lifters and ancient freighters. Gone was the haunted look that had shadowed him through the first years. Now lines at the corners of his eyes spoke of laughter, not loss. Cyrene appeared beside him on the catwalk, her stride confident despite the patched knees of her jumpsuit. Grease streaked her cheek, and a riot of dark, silvery hair was caught in a quick knot. She held a diagnostic slate in one hand, frowning as code scrolled past. Sabotaged hyperdrive, she said, voice clear above the din. Looks like someone tried to reroute the plasma intake with chewing gum and a prayer. Max smirked, glancing up from the housing of a battered skiff. That's Driftport for you. There's a reason the locals call it the last chance. Cyrene rolled her eyes, but her laughter was musical, ringing out over the clangor of the bay. The sound made Max pause, heart swelling with quiet gratitude. 5 years had done nothing to dull her presence. If anything, she shone brighter here, stripped of courtly silks and protocol, her confidence radiant and her mind sharp. She set the slate aside, ducking under a low beam to join him at the open engine. Their home, a refitted cargo pod on the port's upper rim, was a haven of green and gold. Alien plants spilled from battered planters, softening the metal walls. Photos, some faded, some new, clung to the bulkheads, marking the journey from fugitives to partners. Each evening they shared simple meals, spiced roots and protein cakes, eaten cross-legged on the bunk with their legs entwined, laughter and quiet conversation filling the space. Peace was fragile, always threatened by the city's undercurrents, but to them it was precious beyond measure. Tonight, they ate in the glow of a hanging lamp, Cyrene's foot brushing Max's knee as she told him about a merchant who had tried to trade 4 crates of genuine Valyrian relics for a grav mule with a cracked core. Max laughed, the deep, rich sound echoing in the small space. Did you take the deal? Cyrene grinned, her eyes sparkling. I told him the only Valyrian thing in those crates was the dust. He reached for her hand, squeezing gently. Still the sharpest mind in the sector. Before she could reply, a sharp, uncertain knock rattled their hatch. Both went still. Visitors were rare, and never at this hour. Max's instincts tensed, old reflexes stirring beneath the calm. He rose, motioning Cyrene to stay back, as he slid the hatch open a crack. On the other side stood a Dravari, short, nervous, his skin mottled with shifting blue-green patches, eyes darting in every direction. He clutched a battered carry case, its surface etched with bureaucratic glyphs and fresh scoring as if it had survived a dozen close calls. The Dravari's voice quavered. "You are Max." "And Cyrene? Yes?" When Max hesitated, the Dravari pressed on, urgency threading his words. "I have something, I was told. You help those who have nowhere else to go." Cyrene moved beside Max, her presence instantly commanding. "What is it you bring?" she asked, voice careful but not unkind. The Dravari swallowed, glancing over his shoulder. He set the case on the deck and unlatched the seals. Inside rested a stasis cradle, sleek, silver, unmistakably Valyrian in design, its runes softly glowing. Cyrene's breath caught. Max's heart hammered in his chest. This was no ordinary datapod. This was a relic from the life they'd left behind. The Dravari wiped trembling hands on his tunic. "I found her, stowed away on a freighter, hidden among the cargo. I could not return her to the authorities. Too many questions, too many eyes. I need to disappear. You can care for her. Yes?" His desperation was naked, but his fear was real. Max and Cyrene exchanged a look, one filled with all the words they could not speak aloud. Max crouched beside the cradle, entering the override code Cyrene whispered to him. The stasis field dissolved, revealing a child curled within, Valyrian, unmistakably, with luminous skin and a shock of midnight hair. She looked no more than 6, her breathing slow, her features serene. The sight of her in the cradle, so like the one that had once held Cyrene herself, struck them both to the core. Cyrene's hands trembled as she reached in, gently touching the child's cheek. Her own voice, when it came, was steady and sure. "We will take her, and we will keep her safe." Max hesitated, searching Cyrene's eyes for any sign of uncertainty. Instead, he saw only resolve, no longer the pawn she had once been, but a queen by choice, her strength forged in every trial they had shared. He nodded, decision settling over him like armor. "My partner is right," he said, rising to face the Dravari. "You'll have your payment. Then you disappear, and you say nothing about us. Ever." Relief flooded the Dravari's face. He bowed deeply, accepting a handful of cred sticks from Max's outstretched hand. "You will never see me again. I swear it." Cyrene cradled the girl, holding her as if she were made of glass and hope. Max watched her, chest tight with the knowledge that their quiet days were ending, but not with regret. He saw the determination in Cyrene's gaze, the promise that this child would know safety and love, and a freedom neither of them had been given as children. They settled the girl on the bunk, Cyrene stroking her hair as Max sealed the hatch and checked the scanner for signs of pursuit. Outside, Driftport rumbled and buzzed, oblivious to the new life taking root in the battered pod. Inside, the air was tense with change, but also with possibility. Max stood beside Cyrene, his hand finding hers. "We'll protect her, whatever it takes." Cyrene nodded, her chin high. "Whatever it takes." As the child stirred, opening eyes as bright as new stars, Max and Cyrene met her gaze. Not as fugitives, not as victims of a broken galaxy, but as a family. Together they prepared for what was to come, knowing their peace was over, but something stronger had taken its place. Corporate enforcers came at dusk, 3 armored figures from Helix Corp, black helmets glinting in the dying light, each movement methodical and lethal. Their boots thudded on the ferrocrete outside the bay, pulse rifles raised. The faint whine of a plasma torch started up, then the bay doors exploded inward with a thunderous blast, showering the workshop in molten metal and smoke. Max reacted instantly, adrenaline burning away the comfort of their quiet years. He shoved Cyrene and the cradle toward the grav bike, voice sharp but steady. "Go! Get to the bike! I'll cover you!" Cyrene grabbed the stasis cradle, clutching the sleeping Valyrian girl tight to her chest. Her eyes met Max's for a single, searing second, an entire history of trust, sacrifice, and love exchanged in silence. Then she ran, weaving through shadows and half-finished machinery, her footsteps sure and quick. Max slid behind an engine block, the whir of the old grav loader blending with the hiss of escaping steam. He fired a controlled burst at the enforcers, blue plasma bolts shattering against their shields. Sparks flew as he ducked back, sweat beading at his brow. "Helix Corp!" he spat into the comm. "They tracked us." The lead enforcer barked orders. "Asset retrieval. Lethal force authorized." Their voices were cold, distorted by helmet filters. Cyrene's voice crackled in Max's calm despite the chaos. "Activate crane override, Solaris." Max glanced up at the cargo bay's overhead crane, its arm poised above the melee like the sword of some forgotten god. He fired at the control panel. Glass shattered, sparks rained down, and then he keyed in the code on his wristpad. "Solaris," he whispered. Above, gears whined and the crane's magnet groaned to life. With a shudder, it snatched the nearest reactor core, a dense mass of metal and energy, and swung it down, slamming it between Max and the advancing enforcers. The ground shook. The enforcers scattered, one tumbling headlong over the corded power lines, their formation broken. Max seized the opening. He vaulted over a heap of spent drives, firing as he ran, covering Cyrene as she reached the grav bike. He sprinted up the ramp, lungs burning, and dove onto the rear platform. "Punch it!" he yelled. Cyrene didn't hesitate. She slammed her hand down on the ignition. The engines roared to life, the bike's grav thrusters whining as it tore through the haze, out of the ruined bay and into the neon-lit night. Behind them, the enforcers' rifles spat fire, but the shots went wide, bouncing off the hull as the bike veered down a narrow alley and disappeared into the tangled arteries of Driftport. For a long, breathless moment, all Max could hear was the rush of wind and the ragged thump of his own heart. Then Cyrene's voice broke the silence, steady and fierce. "We need to get to orbit. The cradle won't stay hidden long on this rock." Max nodded, tightening his grip on the rear rail. "I'll plot a course. Get us clear of the port perimeter." Cyrene angled the grav bike toward the old launch fields. In the distance, the stars were just appearing, pinpricks of hope against the dark. Max watched the city lights blur past, remembering another night of fire and flight, a memory now laced with purpose, not just survival. They reached the battered shuttle concealed beneath a tarp and half a dozen crates of scrap. Max yanked the tarp free and heaved the cradle into the hold. Cyrene clambered into the cockpit, hands moving in a blur across the controls. The ship's engines coughed, then caught, the old machine eager for flight. Max sealed the hatch and took his place at the co-pilot's station. Through the narrow viewport, he could see the glare of searchlights and the shimmer of distant plasma fire. "They'll be on us in minutes," he said. Cyrene didn't look away from the controls. "They'll be too late." The engines howled. The shuttle rose on a pillar of blue flame, climbing above the rooftops, outpacing the tracer fire that followed in their wake. The city shrank below them, becoming a patchwork of light and shadow, then fell away entirely as the black of space embraced them. In the medbay, the stasis cradle emitted a soft chime. The field disengaged with a hiss, and the lid slid open. The small Valyrian girl inside blinked awake, emerald eyes wide with terror. She shrank back, breath quick and shallow, hands clutching the edge of the cradle. Cyrene knelt beside her, her movements gentle, her voice soft and melodic as she spoke in the ancient Valyrian tongue. "It's all right. You are safe now. No one will harm you." Her words, weighted with promise, seemed to reach through the girl's fear, drawing her gaze. Max lingered at the hatch, watching as Cyrene coaxed the girl into her arms. The sight carved something new and fierce in his chest. All the years of hiding, running, scraping by, they had led here, to this moment. A family forged in the crucible of chaos and hope. The shuttle's sensors beeped, a proximity alert. Max moved to the controls, voice steady. "Strap in. I'm engaging the hyperdrive." Cyrene settled the girl into a harness, fastening the straps with deft, reassuring hands. She brushed a tear from the child's cheek, then crossed to Max's side, her presence grounding him as the threat outside grew distant. He set the coordinates, feeling the old thrill and terror of escape. The hyperdrive spun up with a rising whine, then the stars outside blurred, first to lines, then to a pale wash of infinite possibility. They were fugitives again, but this time, the running felt different. They were not fleeing the ruins of their lives, but racing toward a future they chose, side by side. Cyrene slipped her hand into his, her touch warm, anchoring him. "Whatever comes next, we face it together," she said. Max looked at her, at the girl now asleep and safe, and felt hope bloom. Strange and fragile, but real. "Together," he agreed, voice rough with emotion. Their love, born in fire and tested by betrayal, had become their strength. Not just a shield, but a beacon. For the first time, he understood that survival was not enough. They would fight for more, for the child, for each other, for the hope that somewhere out there, a better life was possible. As the shuttle hurtled into the unknown, Cyrene and Max stood side by side, bound by love and the new life they'd built together, ready to fight for those who needed them most, no matter how far the stars would take them. Our story ends here. Make sure you subscribe, press the like button, and tell us in the comments what stood out to you the most in this video. Your feedback means a lot to our team. You'll discover many more captivating stories on our channel. See you in the next one.